You're watching Stock Watch this week. I'm Zinati Guma, and join me to unpack your stock-related questions today via Zoom are David Shapiro from Sasfin Securities and Gerabilo Nonyana from Scope Prime Africa. Be sure to send your questions through via email to stockwatch@bdtv.co.za, via SMS on 41392 or an X at Business Day TV using the hashtag StockWatch. Thank you so much for your time, gents. It is D-Day and we're seeing a sell-off in the markets, but just starting off with you, Kiarabilo, do you think this sell-off is actually as hectic as maybe some people would have thought? Yeah, what's your take on the market movements today?
Well, looking at where markets have been for the past couple of weeks, I didn't expect there to be such a reaction. I don't think it's a broad-based sell-off, but I mean, I think there's a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction. But I think in terms of these tariffs, what I've seen is the political will of Donald Trump to exert his pressure on where he finds that there needs to be pressure implied. So, I mean, some of the countries like Mexico, where he has free trade agreements with, he's carried on with the tariffs that essentially are just trying to get them in place because of some other political issues such as immigration. And in SA, as we know, we haven't been the favorites of the U.S. government for a very long time. So essentially, he just carried on and just said, you know what, I'm going to stick it to you guys, and we're going to keep these tariffs. And they're really taking a hard line on negotiations. So for people he likes, he's been rather favorable. For the people he doesn't like, he's gone and stuck it to everyone, really.
We live in Trump's world. We're just visitors. David, it's actually quite interesting because for the last few months, I mean, we've seen the dollar weakening and weakening, but all of a sudden it is now performing really, really well, and the rand under pressure, but I think below 18 rand 40. Yeah, what do you make of how the markets are reacting right now?
Well, that's Powell's fault. You know, I mean, he's having a battle with Trump, and he said, "I'm going to show you." And even though there is margin, that's why there were two dissenters for him to reduce rate. He's holding firm, and correctly so, because after these tariffs, we're not quite sure what the outcome is going to be. You know, before the tariffs, I would have said, yeah, there was margin for him to reduce rates, but now you're getting a bit worried because some of these are ridiculous. And as Kirabiri said, he's like an immature schoolboy. You know, I'm going to get you back. I don't like you. And there's absolutely no foundation for some of these tariff increases, specifically against Mexico and against us. You know, I mean, he don't like Mr. Ramaphosa. You know, he don't, for whatever reason. I don't even think he knows too much about South Africa at all. But 30% is killer. And do you know, Zinati, it's smaller businesses. You know, we might just brush it aside. Yeah. But if you're you've got a farm down in the Western Cape that sell, citrus farm or what, you're going to suffer.
Yeah.
And it's those small little operations that we can't kind of put together as a big force. There are going to be a lot of little businesses that are going to feel this pressure.
Yeah.
So, just an awful man.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, no, somebody called it gangster politics yesterday. Well, one of the companies that I saw earlier on had the biggest hit on the JSE, but now not so much. Sasol has overtaken it. Richemont. And of course, we know that Trump has slapped a 39% tariff on Switzerland, but of course, Richemont, of course, being listed on the JSE as well. Garabil, I mean, how much could the impact of these tariffs be on a counter like Richemont that is seen as, one of the good ones in that luxury sector?
Well, I think that they're different levels to luxury. I mean, I'd call this the entry-level luxury. Not that I can afford it, but I mean, for entry-level luxury, it is one of, because if you look at the operational performance and the geographical performance of Richemont, it's really done well in the US. I mean, Europe is kind of coming along. China has a lot of consumer confidence issues, which essentially has led them not to want to essentially spend on any luxury goods. So I think Richemont has an important demographic in the US. And I think even looking at the US GDP print number, you see a consumer who's resilient, who could take up some of these products. And if those import tariffs are going to affect sales going forward, it's really going to affect the business. But looking at where the growth for that business come from, it comes from jewelry. And I mean, I don't know. Are people going to not want to buy more jewelry? I just don't know at the moment. I think Richemont's a great counter, but I just think at the moment that, as we said, Donald Trump is affecting its future at the moment.
Yeah, that's the thing. And it's quite an interesting point that you make there, that are people just not going to want to buy jewelry? And I mean, luxury a lot of the time is seen as very, very defensive, that people, they don't really care. It's like, you already know you're paying very high prices for the product. So what difference does this make? David?
You know, remember the Chinese would always come into South Africa, or they always go into Europe or America, and they buy cheap watches there, and they arbitrage, you know, and I think the Americans are going to do the same. They're going to go into Europe, or they're going to come down to South Africa and buy the Rolex or Cartier or whatever they do. I mean, 39% is ridiculous, and it's going to have an impact. And it will have an impact on the profitability, because America, Japan and China have been slowing down in terms of demand on the high end of luxury. But this will turn people away, no matter what. So how they monitor it, and how, particularly on the, in the jewelry side, where the manufacture might take place in America, whatever. But still, it's 39%, and on pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
The American consumer is going to pay for it. And these are very important pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
This is not their aspirin or something like this, or grandpa's headache powders. These are oncology drugs, disease drugs for diseases. So I don't know where the thinking is. I don't know where he wants them to open up factories in America. I mean, the thinking is so distorted. Anyway, look, for the meantime, the rand is now 18, whatever it is, and I think that's given our market a cushion. If it wasn't for that rand, I think we'd be a lot worse than we are at the moment. Yeah.
As you're talking about pharmaceuticals, I'm thinking about all the Ozempic consumers. Good luck to them. Good luck. And summer's coming, so I don't know. All right.
They'll use all those compounders that cause so much havoc for Novo Nordisk. They'll find those drugs on the street corner, somewhere along the line. You'll find the fatty drugs. Don't worry.
Gents, also something that's quite interesting. I mentioned that Sasol has overtaken Richemont in the biggest losers on the JSE at the moment, down almost 5%. Of course, you know how volatile the stock is. And I'm wondering, Kiarabulu, is this now a kind of outlook on the oil market and maybe the impact of these tariffs on economic growth?
I think maybe it is, but the truth about it is, I mean, there's an energy deficit in the world. The problem is that Sasol operates in a chemical business in South Africa. I mean, if we really had to be honest about it. Yeah. And essentially that's where a lot of the pain comes from, apart from the fact that there's a trust deficit with management, and essentially had quite a high debt bill, debt crisis, in my opinion, and almost negative free cash flows in the past two reporting quarters. I mean, anything. I mean, you can take it to a second-year student, telling them about negative free cash flows for a business, and essentially they'll tell you that their share price is supposed to not be doing well, and Sasol hasn't been doing well. But on a technical basis, I've seen quite on the money flow index, seeing quite a bit of movement, meaning that there's been some institutional interest. I don't know from where and where it's coming from. It hasn't gone through my trading desk, but there seems like there's a bit of interest from institutional investors in this name, and I hope they're looking at a very deep value if they're putting their money in Sasol this early.
You're actually right. From a technical basis, I've been speaking to a lot of technical analysts, and they've been telling us that Sasol is in a cumulative phase where the institutional investors are nibbling. And David, I don't know if this is a case of investors thinking that this is just too cheap to ignore, but also does then that go against the fundamentals of the company?
I think I said it the other night. I said that chemicals has killed Sasol, it's killed AECI, it's killed Omnia.
Kill Omnia.
It's a difficult market, and that's because it's it's related to manufacturing, it's related to the expansion of industry. So I think we've got to overcome that. The chemical prices are low, and I think that's holding back Sasol. But as Kirabella said, I like what he said, the deficit, what management deficit, a structural deficit, all kinds of deficits that Sasol has that they have to overcome. I like the way he expressed it. Yeah. And I think we still got to overcome a lot of issues for Sasol to pick up again. You can look elsewhere. Yeah. And energy commodities is such a difficult area to play. We've seen it. We've seen all those, all the platinum bulls over the last 2 days. Yeah, they're sitting on fire. This chair's a little hot.
Yeah.
But that's what happens. You want to trade commodities. This is it. That's the game. It's thrombosis type stocks.
That's actually so. That's actually so interesting. I think, that's actually why we have you guys on here to connect the dots for us, because as much as I've been looking at these different companies, it actually hadn't come to my mind that chemicals, you're right, they're actually the dark spot in all these companies, Omnia, AECI, and Sasol. So, very, very interesting to connect that dots. British American Tobacco has actually extended its gains from yesterday, up more than 3% as we speak. And of course, it did release interim results, very, very different from what we saw with AB InBev. And it's funny because British American Tobacco has been seen as an ex-growth company. Is that still the narrative, David?
For me, it's an unhealthy company. It makes products that are unhealthy, seriously. And I can't understand how we continue to buy this business. I know there are a lot of employees there and that, but it's wherever you look, even if it's not tobacco, whatever it is, authorities are always trying to clamp down. Yes, and they creep up and they make, I still think a lot of emerging markets in Europe, people continue to smoke in restaurants and everything like this. But, these are not great results. And I can't buy a company where everybody wants to end its business, or bring it to an end. But still, they produce results, and the investment industry, we don't care as long as we make money, so I just...
But this is the thing, David.
Okay. I don't mind having a beer, but smoking has never been my favorite pastime.
But that's the thing. People are buying less beer and they're buying more vapes. The regulators are trying to end it, but the people are smoking up. People are smoking up a storm with those vapes.
Do you smoke? No.
No. But people are smoking up a storm, David. It's not about me.
The shares have done incredibly well, but I'm saying I've got resistance to the gambling companies and smoking companies.
But they're doing well. Caravilla, they're doing well.
Especially in the smokeless products. I think, Philip Morris and Altria have kind of led the way, but it seems like BTI is catching up, and he's essentially in that smokeless product range. They're seeing more volume growth than both Philip Morris and Altria. But I think it's just so strong. It just generates strong cash flows. As much as there may be some ethical questions as to what they sell and if governments really like it, I think it's one that's the bedrock of many portfolios and is a great dividend payer. Would I hold it right now? Probably not, but I think it's just a great company. Albeit, as David said, they do sell some products which are not necessarily great for people.
Even those products You know, you got to go behind the change room to smoke them, or you got to go down to the seventh basement. You know, you can't smoke them in the office, you know, or in somebody's motor car.
I've seen people in some offices and in some restaurants, they're not allowed to smoke. They're smoking them under the table. They're blowing under the table. All right. Well, let's go into more questions. There is a question on diversified miners, of course, that have a significant holding in copper. Copper has been leading Anglo-American BHP and Glencore from October 2023 to now. Why? And what could be, a good reason for buying these stocks? And David, that's copper, right?
Yeah, it is copper. Copper's held up pretty well, but we're in a difficult period, Sanati. You know, if you think about what tariffs might do, and my big issue, and that's why I keep calling for Mr. Powell to start reducing rates and that, we need some vitality in the global economy. We need a stimulus, something to get us going again. We're becoming very dull. The only thing that's getting us through is AI. You know, that's on a different lane, you know, but the good old economic stocks are really under pressure, whether it's retailers, banks, whatever it is. And miners will only benefit, you know, when we start to see proper growth. Where they can make benefits, or where they can, is that when you start to expand those data centers, of course, they require a huge amount of energy. And that's one area that they can benefit. But to be fair, we haven't seen anything spectacular happening in mining that's going to break kind of a 5-year sideways trend. Yes, there are periods up and down, as we've seen with platinum and so on. But I think we're only going to get into, you know, I only feel happy of buying these diversified miners, meaning Rios and BHP Billiton and Anglo's, Glencore and so on, when we go into a proper growth period, you know, when IMF come and say, yeah, the global economy is growing again, you know, and starts upgrading its outlook rather than downgrading it.
That's interesting. But I mean, with so much optimism being placed on copper for the future, and I understand that we need economic growth, would then this not be the right time to start nibbling, Gerabil?
Probably, I mean, on some of the counters, mainly Glencore was just buying back shares and it's cash flush, to be perfectly honest. And that's the only reason I'd pick a diversified mine. I agree with David. I think sometimes, I've only been in the markets for just over a decade. One thing I've never seen is prices remaining sustainably high with no economic growth, and I mean that by commodity prices. And for looking at where the JSE is with all these miners which have kind of led to the growth of the all-share index, it's all been in precious mining, in precious metals, and nothing in base metals. But with copper, with that being said, with copper has the advantage of being involved in conduction in the fourth industrial revolution and the AI drive. And I think that's where you've seen the structural re-rating, and a lot of analysts predicting that there are going to be supply side shocks in 2035, which is 10 years from now. So I mean, essentially, you're looking into a crystal ball and saying, in 10 years, we will have supply side issues. And to be perfectly honest, we know how civilization works. We kind of solve our problems. And that essentially frothed up the price of copper. But would I be taking up any of these stocks? I'd probably take up Glencore just purely because it has cash and it's buying back shares.
Okay. Well, the subject to this is Mag 1, but a lot of people don't even consider it as part of the Mag 7, and that is Tesla. Where do you see Tesla in 6 to 12 months? Well, I even feel like Elon Musk has answered this question. Didn't he say in the last earnings report about, when was it, last week, that we can expect a few more quarters where, the stock is challenged, David?
Yeah, exactly that. If he says it's going to be challenged, I'm not going to argue with him. I don't know. He's got a following. I'm not one of the followers. I don't take anything away from his genius.
Yeah.
But he's a rather odd kind of a genius. And I think he's let EVs, he's let Tesla slip. And it's going to take a monumental effort to get it back. I'm not questioning all the other issues around Tesla. I mean, the AI side and so on. But generally, we're going to judge the company from electric vehicles. And there's a lot of competition, especially from the Chinese that are coming in. They're a lot smarter, they're a lot cheaper, and so on. He's got a lot of work ahead of him. You know, I think there's other companies in the mags that I would rather go for.
There was someone in America was driving behind a Tesla, and there was a sticker on that Tesla that said, "I bought this Tesla before Elon started causing trouble." Your take on Tesla?
You know, I was doing a little bit of light reading, and I was reading on one of the famous hedge fund managers. He says once he starts seeing management of company focus on something else, he starts selling that stock off. And he just said, to be perfectly honest, when Elon Musk started dabbling in politics, that was the moment he called it and said, you know what, he's got his eye off the ball. And looking at how competitive the market is and the regulations, especially in Europe, I mean, all across Europe, you're just seeing regulations come in, and your cheaper BYDs coming in, even here in South Africa. It's really a tough competitive space, which I think he had first mover advantage, but right now he's just dealing with governments, and as well as the fact that he took a year off focusing on the presidential run of the president of the United States.
Yeah, and now trying to start his own party. Anyway, just trying to see if we can get to your stock picks. Okay, let's get to your stock picks. All right, David, what are you choosing today?
You know, just 2 days ago, I chose Meta, which has gone up magnificently in there. But I would still stay with it. Remember, I just came off the bench to be on this program, so I haven't thought of one. But I tell you what I'm looking at. Something that has been knocked incredibly is Novo Nordisk. The theme is still intact. And if you haven't gone in now, I'm looking very carefully, because when you make losses like that, everybody gets wounded and they kind of putting plasters on and kind of looking after their bruising. But this is a good business that's been around for 100 years. I think if you looked at the absolute numbers, they're still strong. And although I'm not giving you a loud shout to buy it, I'm looking at these levels. I think they have knocked it far too heavily, and now there's going to be a level where it looks attractive. And believe me, they will still sell Ozempic and Wegovy and so on. But I think this whole sell-off that we're seeing now in Europe is actually going to throw up some very attractive entry points.
Okay, all right.
I say Ferrari as well, yeah. So, but Novo Nordisk is attracting me at these levels.
Yeah. Interesting that you bring up Ferrari. I had Muhammed Wagley on, and he also chose Ferrari as his stock pick.
Hey, that's interesting.
Yeah.
He's still learning, you know that.
I'm finished. Where are you finding opportunity today?
Yeah, no, so since this week was the 10-year celebration of Ethereum, I chose the BlackRock ETH ETF, which is the Ethereum. And that's just purely because I'm just following where the money is. I mean, you look at the network expansion and more transaction happening on that chain and seeing about 10.2 odd billion into the ETF inflows into Ethereum. I think we have a price target of above 5,000 internally on Ethereum. So I'm just following where the money is and just taking the BlackRock ETF.
All right.
Where do you find these youngsters? Where do you find all these children?
They're going where the money resides, David. They're going where the money resides. Okay. Thank you so much for your time today. Had a lot of fun, gents. So really do appreciate your analysis and your banter. Thanks to my guests, David Shapiro from Sasfin Securities and Keramilo Nonyana from Scope Prime Africa. Do remember that Stockwatch pre-records on a Monday and Wednesday at 1 p.m. and is live at 6:30 p.m. on a Tuesday and Thursday, while Stockwatch this week is live at 12:30 p.m. on Fridays. Keep that in mind and do keep sending your questions. For now, that's all from Stockwatch this week, but do stay tuned for lots more coming up right here on Business Day TV.